What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. This is the podcast where you can hear the real stories behind the people on social media. I'm your host, Jacob Kelly. As always, today's podcast is powered by Trufan, and today is the second ever episode of The Social Report. If you're new here, what The Social Report is a monthly podcast where I sit down with Cam and Scott from Trufan, and we discuss some of the most interesting news in social media and influencer marketing from the last 30 days. Last month's episode was a blast, and I've been looking forward to this one ever since. Guys, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Jacob. Great to be here. Great intro.
Hey, yeah. Last one was super fun.
100%. So where I want to start today is, I don't know if have you guys played the new game Fall Guys yet?
No. Is it like it looked like an app to me. And then I saw the article and I saw it was released on PS4. I was like, what?
Yeah, so it's a massively multiplayer online game. So it's technically classified as the same type of game as Fortnite, I guess technically, but essentially it's like you remember the old TV show Wipeout?
Yeah. Yep.
It's kind of like if you took Wipeout to the extreme and the play, instead of people, it was like jelly beans with feet, but it is so much fun. It's free on the PlayStation right now. So I downloaded it and it's like pretty addicting. So you have to make it through 5 rounds, and every round they eliminate more and more players until the last round is just the last person standing, basically. It's arcadey, but it's so much fun. But the reason I wanted to bring them up on the podcast today was how they're handling social media. And the game itself only has one social account, and that's on Twitter. And they recently started doing a thing called the Battle of the Brands. And what the Battle of the Brands is, so within the game, you can like dress up your jelly bean or your character in different outfits and stuff. So what they decided to do was they decided to sell the opportunity for you to have a skin in the game. So it could be a branded skin, or whoever bids the highest gets this skin or this outfit put into the game, with all proceeds going to Special Effect, which is a UK-based charity that's leveling the playing field for gamers with physical disabilities around the world. And so basically they put out this campaign and some big names jump in on it right away. I know Mr. Beast jumped in, Ninja jumped in. I think Mr. Beast was bidding somewhere over $100,000. Ninja came in with like $200,000. And right now the highest bidder is a YouTube account called FV Family, which I'd never heard of. It's a UK-based gaming channel with over 6 million subs, and they've bid $422,000 for the skin right now. There's a week left, and they're the leader in this Battle of the Brands. And I love this strategy. One, obviously, it's gamifying their social by having these brands jump in, but the average consumer can't participate because the bidding is so high now, but it keeps them coming back to the Twitter account to check the standings of this Battle of the Brands. So it keeps people engaged even though they can't participate themselves. And I mean, on top of this, it's not like this. So the account's now sitting at 1.2 million followers on Twitter. And it's not just driven from this contest, but this contest is helping. And from August 18th to 20th, I went and was looking into their analytics and stuff. They gained over 317,000 followers in 3 days.
Wow.
Which is just, it's insane. And so on top of that, of course, it's free on PlayStation right now, which is how it's growing. A bunch of streamers are getting in on it. And I know like they were kind of messing with one popular streamer named Tim the Tap Man on Twitter because he couldn't actually win. He couldn't make it all the way to the 5th round and win. So it was a big deal when he finally did that. So they obviously jumped on that bandwagon. But I have another quote here from a separate article I found just as I was kind of doing some last minute prep for this. And it was an interview with their social media manager. And he was talking about a key factor for them is, in terms of retaining players as well as driving new user growth, is through growth loops. And he kind of views his social strategy as a growth loop. So it starts with engagement. So their players will engage with the social media channel, and then the social account will take the content that their community has made and turn that into content. So it starts with their fans engaging with them. They then turn that into content, which new players see the content and then follow them. And it's just a constant cycle. So they're looking at it through growth loops. But that was a really long tangent for me on Fall Guys' a social strategy. Obviously, this Battle of the Brands is a big driver of it. Also, just their community engagement is really helping them grow as well. But my 2 questions for you is, 1, what do you think primarily of the Battle of the Brands strategy? But 2, do you think a lot of brands sleep on Twitter as a platform to gain awareness? I feel like if brands could only pick one social platform, they go to Instagram first 90% of the time. But Fall Guys is having tremendous success on Twitter, and I feel like a lot of brands don't look at it as a social platform to gain a ton of awareness.
There's a few things with that. the one thing that I'm seeing, and specifically that you said, like it's like a Fortnite meets Wipeout. The cool thing I like that is it's becoming more and more common to have that personalization in game and make it like a front and center thing, because I can look at a few different games outside of just these two that the skins and the ability to personalize drive a lot of the culture behind it. Looking at Fortnite or looking at now this game, when new skins come out, like that's what people are talking about. Yes, they're talking about the new features, but a lot of people are talking about how the personalization is going, and then that kind of falls into place about, oh, okay, now people are looking to personalize, and it gives brands a chance to allow their consumers to represent them, or allow their brands to help consumers better represent themselves. So I really, really like that, and I think that's done very well on like getting brands engaged in their platform. That's something that someone like Fortnite has done, but in a very different sense. They were probably doing like partnerships on the back end with like Marvel, I know was one in particular, and then obviously they've done like concerts and whatnot. And then on the flip side with Twitter, Twitter's one of those places where this is the one thing I see really interesting, that it's like a very like growth hacking oriented campaign where you don't see like big fancy productions on Twitter, but you see very unique and creative campaigns. The other one that comes to my mind outside of Fall Guys is Burger King, when they went back and liked all these influencers tweets, like, and then all of a sudden these influencers started reposting, and in the way Twitter operates, like that caught on and like that became viral, but it wasn't anything really fancy, right? It was just the way Twitter is as a culture and how people interact on Twitter, which I find is very like obviously news oriented. And so playing off of that, I think it can be a strength, but also a weakness if brands don't know how to operate well with it, or if a brand's very visual. Like a lot of D2C brands are extremely visual, hence why they thrive on Instagram and maybe not Twitter. But if brands can somehow find these very unique, creative ways to work with Twitter's algorithm and how the culture is, I think there's tons of opportunity. Whether you stay on Twitter as your main platform for that attention, that's a different story. But to create that virality, there's tons of opportunities for brands to play in this space for sure.
Yeah, I mean, tacking on to that, I think that the whole Twitter strategy for them is definitely more of a strategic piece, given that the gaming community is much more affluent, like with Twitter. And certainly there's like a good chunk of them that would be on Instagram and that are using Instagram a fair bit, like the rest of the population is in North America. But I definitely look at this and say that picking Twitter and sticking with Twitter as the only option gives people one option. So that's like strategy right from the get-go to say, like, we're not only going to do this campaign, but we're going to double, triple, quadruple down on this campaign, because there is not a whole lot of value in us trying to spread our wings in other areas right off the bat, knowing that like we have the community here. And if we do it well enough here, like you said, Jacob, we really see the growth loop that can come of this type of strategy. And it's worked for them in spades, clearly. And then I think going back to your first question, I mean, just in general, I think about like this type of campaign and this being done on Twitter. Um, it's definitely strategic in the sense of, I always look at the gaming industry of one that like brands want to stay away from. And yet somehow, like, this was really well thought out, because somehow they've been able to give almost any brand some quick attention within the gaming community and the ability to potentially drive much more awareness on a grander scale by getting that skin within the game. But then when you think about like other brands out there trying to immerse themselves, like non-endemic brands in the esports space, they're just, I mean, a lot of them are unsuccessful, plainly put. So like for them to have not only been able to incentivize other brands and people to kind of like post for free and have that organic influencer effect on the channel, but to actually, I mean, generate this kind of open door for non-endemic brands and whoever wants to be a supporter or somebody who's going to be involved with this. Um, I mean, I think that's just amazing work. And like somebody on their strategy team is, getting tremendous amounts of pats on the back. I love this like tweet that they put out too, is like, shout out to all the community managers out there that are having really awkward meetings today with their higher ups about why they should put a logo on a bean in a video game for 130K. Like, it's just being so true to yourself, but like, spin it up. If you can laugh at yourself through this, like, it's just going to do you all that much better. So really impressive stuff.
Kind of based on that, one quick final question on this is, what do you guys think then with how Fall Guys has committed themselves to Twitter? What do you think in terms of casting a wide net and being on all the platforms versus going all in on one when you first start up a brand?
Well, I personally am a huge believer in, you should focus on one thing and do it really well, and then come back to it. And again, I don't know the size of their team, how long they've been around for, but they're clearly in that category of they're focusing on one thing and doing it really well when it comes to social. It then makes it that much easier to translate attention across other platforms. Obviously, some of the bigger ones being YouTube and then Twitch, for their industry at least. So I think I love this notion. I think every brand should at least start out that way, where they're focused on one platform that suits them really well, and then once they've been able to really own that, branch out.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it all speaks back to like what their goals are for this campaign. And Twitter is an ultra strategic platform. If you want to gain reach across a number of different UTMs or links and stuff like that, like multiple links within the bio, no limit on that. So you can already see that they have a Steam and a Discord link in their bio. Their pinned tweet is literally 5 different links within one tweet. And that thing has 54K likes, 6.5K retweets. Like, they're naturally going to be sharing links when they think it's, in their best interest to do so. And to me, that's just setting them up to say, hey, one day we're going to start an Instagram page or a TikTok page or, whatever is most relevant. And just all of a sudden, these followers are just going to turn from like Twitter right to that page because there'll be some sort of contest or some sort of campaign. So it's a strategic. I mean, I've seen athletes for years and years, like, literally, I think Twitter was just something that like their social media manager got them to start solely for the purpose of gaining more Instagram followers, because they would just have like the link to their Instagram account. I mean, the surf industry, for whatever comes to mind for that, but like it works. And I mean, it's kind of underrated. I think a lot of people don't necessarily put time into Twitter when, in the grand scheme of things, if you do it well, like, it gives you a crazy net.
No, absolutely. Twitter's a platform. The way it's been described to me is like Twitter rewards you for thinking well, Instagram rewards you for looking good.
Mm, yeah.
That's a good one.
But I think someone mentioned using Twitter, Burger King leveraging influencers to kind of gain attention. And I believe someone had a story here about platforms leveraging influencers to gain attention.
Yeah, I thought this one was really cool. The article I got for you guys today, I mean, there's a bit to back it up, but essentially, the one article that I had here was the notion that social influencers are really, feeding the stock market. The article specifically hones in on Robinhood, and if anyone doesn't know what Robinhood is, it's a very retail oriented, like retail first trading platform, where you can trade stocks. I think you can trade crypto as well, and it's been interesting because Robinhood has been kind of the center of attention for a lot of different, news articles or stock news. And the other article that kind of pairs this, before going into what influencers have to do with this, is that there was over 40,000 people that signed up to Robinhood after the Kodak surge, when they landed that deal with the U.S. government for COVID related production, which still, that doesn't make sense to me, but that's for another conversation. And having 40,000 people join this platform over one news article is pretty insane, to have that kind of sway. And again, whether that was predicted or not, who knows? The notion is like that happened, and that was a result of the internet. And that then leads back to this idea that all these social influencers are out here talking about investing and talking about trading, and a lot of them are particularly talking about trading on Robinhood. And so, particularly in this article, they're talking about a couple of these TikTokers that are now giving this like investing 101 kind of crash course on TikTok. Who would have thought you'd be getting investing advice on TikTok, first of all? And it's a thing, right? And like people are looking at these influencers and saying like, hey, these are people like me, hence I can trade as well, or I can invest in stocks and equities. And that brings up this really interesting notion that I'm starting to see more and more. This is just another example of it, that the stock market, the forex market, whatever, forex not as much, but these markets are starting to be swayed by social, whether it is news right from the brands or influencers talking about their stocks that they're looking at, or how to trade, or why you should trade or shouldn't trade. It's so interesting. And my big thing is, there's a few different ways to look at it, whether you're a brand or an influencer or a stock trader, is should you be taking these people into consideration and what they're saying when you're trading? Or better yet, if you're a brand, should this start to be play into your overall strategy of like, hey, if we're looking to raise money, or if we're looking to gain popularity, is this a way to gain popularity? And I don't know, I think there's nothing really in particular that I wanted to kind of talk on. I think it was more so just a really interesting article that I'm sure you guys have some thoughts on, but I think this is a trend that's not going to go away, of people being more and more influenced on the financial side by influencers, which isn't seen that much.
Oh, you're totally not wrong. I think you were there at the Collision conference last year. Well, when when it happened in Toronto in person, but like at the Collision conference, we met that guy. He was from San Francisco, a hedge fund down there. I can't. It's not coming to light
World
right now,
Quant.
but yeah, World Quant. And he was majorly interested. In fact, like so interested that he was tabling phone calls with me every like few months after I'd be like, hey, it's not right time to kind of look at product enhancements or that focus for us right now, just because it's really not like a primary industry or market for us. But he had so much interest in it and still does to this day. I know if I was to email him like right now saying, hey, you want to hop on a call, I think we might have some like development resources or capabilities to put towards that, he would. But I think just you talking about how that is not going to go away, when you brought this up, initially started thinking about how this is going to be a compounding effect over the course of time, because naturally PR affects the cycle of stocks pretty dramatically. In some way or another, that ultimately is what a lot of investors rely upon when they're looking for gains or expecting certain gains, whether it be for quarterly reports and different things like that. It's kind of as a result of how that news travels. And nothing can travel quite as quickly as things do socially and online right now. Instagram gives people a platform to build trust, as does almost every other social platform. But I refer to Instagram because it's a place where, knowing how much people are on that platform monthly or daily, there is, I don't really know what the percentage would be, but a strong percentage of those people that still need to be financially educated. And so I just think back to a friend of mine. It goes, his handle, I'll shout it out right now, Make More Capital. Shout out to Make More Capital. But like, he's been grinding on this financial, education thing using social for, I'd say, the better part of the last year and a half. So committed. But you were talking about TikTok and like how that's become such a relevant place to learn about, just about anything, let alone personal finance. That my girlfriend talks about it all the time as well. He's been on Instagram for the last year and a half, grinding away, daily posts, if not more than once a day, like constantly on the strategy. He's about like 3,500 followers. And this is after like 2 weeks ago, one of his TikTok videos got picked up by Puberty, and he got tagged somehow on Instagram by Puberty and one other like meme account that had 8 million followers. So like, you could tell even that those accounts don't have too much like sway in terms of like a one-off post, unless it has a ton of like context within a meme account. But he did gain some followers, like a couple hundred that day, but 3,500 followers on Instagram, a year and a half. TikTok, it's been like 2 months, and the guy's at like 7,500 followers. Granted, clearly his content isn't as solely focused on finance as I would say it is on Instagram, but that could just fall into more content strategy, if you ask me. And knowing that, like, hey, not every single post has to be aimed at a certain audience. In fact, those audience, that one audience that you're trying to reach, has other interests that you can cater to, and it gives you that much higher likelihood of attracting new followers. But yeah, TikTok it's the spot if you're willing to be consistent and put out that daily content or regular content, I think.
Yeah.
Where my brain went a lot of different ways when I took a look at this article. The first one that I kind of wanted to throw to you is kind of tying back to a thing we talked about in the last social report was brand partnerships and partnering with influencers long term. So with that, with brands partnering with influencers long term, and I was talking about how influencers can affect a brand's stock. May have already happened, and I just don't know. But do we foresee a situation where a brand partners with an influencer on a long-term deal, that influencer then gets into controversy, which drives down a brand stock? Like the closest example I can think of is Elon Musk when he smoked weed on Joe Rogan's podcast and the Tesla stock dropped. But do you ever see influencer affecting the stock of a brand it works with?
Yeah, yeah, I would definitely say like it could go both ways, whether it's good or bad. Obviously, the negative could have a bigger impact. Um, but I'm trying to think
Yeah,
like,
like Barstool comes to mind for me. I'm not like a huge Barstool guy. I think I said it like on the last podcast, but naturally, some of their content is a little bit on the edge for certain audiences, and like you, I mean, obviously there's certain investors that are backing a company like that, but in the same vein, something that is too offside could really quickly result in the natural reaction of most people who invest, which is bad news, time to pull, and it's could be a downhill slope from there. But tough to say. And I think the other aspect of all of this is, what you made me think of earlier, Cam, is financial educators and ultimately financial advisors. They're really not that. And so like social also opens a door for them to take an alternative route at that type of career, or ultimately that industry, um, and find people in a different way and ultimately not be so focused on the bottom line. That's kind of the other part that I'm sure interests a lot of the people within that industry.
And I've never actually used Robinhood. Have either of you guys used it?
No,
no,
Quest Trade guy.
I've never used either of the platforms, but like in terms of social media, I heard that some of those investment, like consumer facing investment platforms, have some social, like the implemented tactics from social media platforms to keep their users engaged on the platform. Like they've almost gamified investing to kind of keep their users on it longer. Have you noticed that with Quest Trade, Scott?
Yeah. I mean, they definitely have a trading platform, and it's you know it has a great UI. I would say. I wouldn't say they try anything over the top or extra in terms of engaging you, and I really don't get that much notifications or emails from them. But yeah, I'm not the most seasoned investor or like active per se.
I would definitely say crypto plays a part of that much more than like regular uh, brokers. Like I know for instance, Binance has their own coin, like BNC or something, and they're always giving these different incentives on doing X or Y actions to get like Binance coin. So I know crypto's plays that game a lot more, which it makes a lot more sense considering like it's a much newer, a more digital focused platform, and so there is that kind of side of it. But yeah, I've definitely noticed that the crypto platforms kind of do that.
Um, well, I guess maybe jump into another subject, a little bit of a different lens here, but I wanted to bring into the fold the two main video sharing platforms or screen sharing platforms and such like that I'd say people are using right now. Zoom obviously being one, and then Microsoft Teams. I wouldn't shouldn't say leading, but I just think that under the radar they've kind of gotten to so many things over a short period of time, um, that it's pretty. I mean, it's worth looking at, especially if if you're a Microsoft shareholder. Well, I mean, kudos to you, but I'm sure things are looking up in that world right now. I think what's really interesting to me, and I'll touch on the Zoom aspect later, but obviously NBA has returned to play. Sports are back within the last month. I think that's kind of come into play. So it's been quite interesting looking at social, how things have sort of developed. And I think the surge of content that has come from particularly the NBA, I wouldn't say so much the NHL. And that maybe is a topic for another conversation. But I found an article that actually described how people can become a virtual fan in the NBA bubble, because they launched those screens that basically have these virtual crowds of people, and they all look like they're in the same kind of seat, but like it's just a selfie video essentially of these people. Um, and it's sick how it's like all ongoing. They can react, they can like cut to multiple different shots. But I hadn't even heard of like how are people getting on these things. And it was, I mean, this whole idea by the NBA definitely wasn't by accident. When I read through this article and you start to see that like teams can choose how they engage fans or give those spots away differently. So ultimately, on one end, that was something that was created so that teams would have another way of engaging their fan base. They're letting them do that on a team by team level, and it sounds like certain teams are going for more kind of family, friends, and stuff like that of the players, plus season ticket holders. And then others are using that more as a way to like actually get more online engagement, organic content and things like that. But as a pure result of the scarcity behind this campaign, or I mean, this just whole initiative, people and influencers are also starting to post just because they're fans of the game, fans of the sport, and they're trying to get, I guess, seen for their chance at a virtual ticket. So, I mean, I just found this to be so interesting. It's kind of touching community, it's touching COVID, it's touching influencer marketing. And I'd love to know, like, what do you guys think of the whole return to play and bubble presence of the NBA on social right now?
To your point, I think the NBA has been a lot better in terms of content. And what's been most interesting for me in terms of the content coming out of the bubble is the content being put out by players themselves. Um, his name's escaping me. I think Matthias Tibul or something like that is the 76ers rookie who started doing a Casey Neistat style vlog from within the bubble. So it's been interesting to watch how players are approaching the content output within the bubble. And then to your point, like we haven't seen it much in the NHL. And you said that might be a conversation for another podcast. I am recording a podcast with Drew Cohen coming up shortly, and we'll be talking about that on the podcast. But my biggest thing with the content, like I said, has just been watching how players have reacted to putting out content from in the bubble. And part of it could just be boredom. There's less distractions in the bubble than there is in everyday life. So that could be why we're seeing more content. But it's been interesting to see it from a player's perspective, how they're going through this whole adjustment period of being in the bubble.
Yeah, some players have been killing it. Like Dwight Howard, man, that guy's getting every dollar's worth of being on the Lakers, like social currency to the max.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't have too much to say here, as I found myself kind of distant from all bubbles in all the sports. But the one thing that I have noticed that Jacob just mentioned is, out of all of them, I would say the NBA's done an extremely good job in contrast to how everybody else has kind of handled it. Even from like treating their players like they're in Disney versus like hotels for the NHL. That's nuts.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
little bit of a different playing field there.
little
Yeah.
different, yeah. But no, the one thing that I did like is that notion where it's like, hey, we might not have seats to sell, but how else can we at least? I know, I don't know if they're paid or not paid, but at least like keep them involved as much as possible. And again, coming back to that personalization, there's really nothing going on with that seat that's special besides the fact that you are feeling exclusive to having that virtual seat. And I think the NBA's recognized that thirst that people are like growing and growing and growing, and it's becoming like easier to grab hold of as the fall guys are doing at Fortnite. Now the NBA, and so I think it's a genius play, right? Because it's like, who's going to turn, like, even if you're not a basketball fan, you might actually turn to watch a basketball game knowing your friends on the virtual not right. So overall, I just think it's a great play. Great play.
Yeah, I mean, super impressive, and like I think they probably got more for this sort of idea than they ever could have thought it was imaginable. Like the resulting social currency from this type of thing. I mean, I've seen like pictures of Drake. Like some Canadian fan would just leave like a Drake sign in the middle of a seat or something like that too. Just pure laughs all the time. But another interesting part of it is this whole kind of back and forth between Zoom and Microsoft Teams. How, like, have you noticed anything since the start of COVID and since ultimately the quarantine came into effect, that has really leapt out at you at like, a conquest type of move by one of those two competitors at the other to take more market share? To me, I think what's really stood out is stuff like this by Microsoft Teams, where they've tried to integrate much more with, I think, corporate infrastructure, and obviously that is their playground, so to speak, right? B2B sales and that. But I think corporate infrastructure and looking deeper as to like how streaming is evolving versus kind of capturing the now and like the everyday people who are just trying to connect real quick.
I think the biggest thing in terms of like the streaming platforms that I've seen in terms of making a move on another one was how Google had the infrastructure in place that whenever you set a calendar in right now, there's an automatic Hangouts button within Google, which is something that like I've just noticed from a podcast perspective. Whenever I send a guest a calendar invite for this show, I'll put the call link in the calendar invite. But pretty much without fail, every single guest, even if I'm like, hey, just a heads up, there will be a Google Hangouts button. You got to click the call link, not the button, it below in the description. They always just click the Google Hangouts button because it's there and it's prominent. And because so many people use Google, I guess on a corporate side, more people do use Outlook, but at least from my like in my day-to-day life, Google Hangouts is the most prominent just because my infrastructure with my online is through Google, my email, my calendar. So Google's able to just kind of coerce me to use their video streaming platform just because it's naturally built in and it's easy within yeah, it's easy with the user experience of the calendar link to get to that hangout call.
Yeah, those have really boned me actually. Since I joined Zoom, now every single and like I integrated Zoom with my calendar links. Every single one that gets sent out includes both, so I have to like go in 5 minutes before a call and delete the Google, like the Google one, just so people don't end up on that one, and I'm waiting. But yeah, I hear you on that note. Cam, any thoughts on the competition for global streaming and screen sharing dominance?
Yeah, I mean, same with Jacob. Google is just so prominent in that space, and I know it's going to change from workspace to workspace. But what I will say is I know Zoom has just done such a good job on capturing the consumer aspect where people wouldn't normally be there. Because I think that there, the first thing that was there, that's such a minor thing. And again, coming back to that theme of personalization, the backgrounds, like who wasn't talking when COVID first started about being able to change your background to
The Golden
whatever,
Gate Bridge or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, whatever was in your brain at that point. And that was Zoom. Like Zoom was there to do that. Has others, done that since? Probably. But it's crazy how just these little minor changes that I'm sure aren't a big feature for Zoom or whatnot, dev wise, is the things that are making people talk for these platforms. So I think Zoom just had it, and I know Zoom added some other stuff. I forget if it was like better integration with the games that were able to be played or something. But again, just I guess capitalizing on the consumer market because the business side of things have been so saturated just because it's already been in use. So that's really the main thing that I saw is personalization.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to jump to that other topic that I included here just because it is Zoom based. And I think to your point on the consumers end and really the broader market of people who are using these applications every day, they've really taken the lead for us. And I'm almost trying to like do the whole catch up play, right? With people talking about like Zoom as just the way to share screens or like connect with somebody. Do you want to Zoom now? Um, I have noticed, and then I started reading a couple articles that were linking Zoom to like whether it be like education or a place even that fans are hanging out. But I've actually noticed that influencers are starting to use Zoom as a way to build really tight community and grow their engagement. I've had a couple clients and even just people who have used SocialRank over the course of time give me some strong testimonials in terms of some of their artists and different people who have done this as a way of like directly linking it back to increasing their engagement rate because accounts are growing right now. But I think a lot of people are struggling to keep that engagement rate up, which ultimately contributes to big paychecks for these people, and a lot of what they can negotiate on. So I mean, have you guys heard of any of that, or does any like instance or something that you noticed, maybe even like an influencer sharing the opportunity to join a Zoom call, stand out to you?
One thing that jumps out to me, and I've actually spoken with Karen about this a little bit, is social selling. And social selling right now, so basically it's or not sorry, not sorry, it's live social selling. I should make that clarification. And it's really prominent in China right now. I'm just trying to pull up I have the numbers written down here for some of the live social selling numbers in China right now, where people will jump on a live stream and sell you almost like QVC style. And where is it here? Is so right now what they're seeing in China too is a lot of CEOs are jumping on these live streams. So of course, like the traditional celebrity and influencers were doing well, but CEOs are jumping on doing these live streams in China now to crazy results.
Wow.
Mandale Textile achieved $3.5 million worth of sales in a 4-hour live stream.
Huh.
Trip.com made 8.4 million selling travel packages with 5 sessions of 1 hour live or 1 hour long live streams. The
Wow.
chairwoman of Gria Electric sold more than $43.7 million worth of home appliances in a 3-hour live stream.
What? That's
Yeah,
absurd.
these numbers come from the Next Web was the website I found them on. So it's just these it was originally influencers and celebrities, but now CEOs are knowing if they put themselves out there as like the public face of the company on these live streams, they have the ability to move product because no one's going to know. No one in theory should know about the product better than the people at the top, right? So they're engaging directly with the customers and they're selling to incredible results online and on live right now.
Yeah, I mean, I just see the swipe up feature and like just how easy it is to drive traffic towards those is such a game changer and a way that Zooms can. I didn't even think that they'd be used like that, but I mean, thinking about it from an influencer perspective and like community building, um, even the phone numbers, a lot of people using like apps like Community or text messaging style apps, and the ability to use those, but just like an Instagram story. And I I would ask the question to you guys too. Do you see potentially Zoom taking the place of something like an Instagram Live? Now, obviously, Instagram Live has this like one or two unique kind of value prop, but in general, is kind of something unique, and somebody could welcome fans onto the Instagram Live. But this is just like a way of capturing more people and probably more data, like whether it be pixel or other resulting data after the fact, so that you can retarget these people in the future.
That's I think that my only hesitation there is just because the audience is already on Instagram. Like maybe versus like if it's a private live stream, like I could see Zoom being the platform for that. But trying to take your Instagram lives off of Zoom, I think is just tough from a creator perspective because it's already built into Instagram. So there's less friction to get people tuning into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Collaboratively, like it's a way to grow, but like not necessarily
Mhm.
a way to engage your like top fans or something like that.
Well, I mean, in theory, I guess if they're your top fans, then they would probably be the ones to follow you off platform to a Zoom.
Yeah, exactly.
But actually, to your point about you mentioned community there, I'm surprised. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if they have it built in or not because I'm not too familiar with it. But I'm surprised a platform like a community or even like a Slack from a professional standpoint don't have group calling in them. Like if you could just blast out a video call link from your community that's built into the community app that your fans can just click on and join in one easy tap, like that would be super easy and seamless in terms of getting fans to a live call instead of it being Instagram or having to go through a Zoom. I just think that'd be interesting.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they've tried to do something, but like honestly, Zoom is just like why try to build that infrastructure? I mean, I don't know a lot about tech like that, but I would imagine those are as complicated gets in terms of like bandwidth and streaming stuff. So
Mhm. That's fair.
Cam, any thoughts?
No, I don't think on that topic. Again, it's all comes up so quick, and I think there's nothing. There's just I don't know if anybody knows what goes on completely, and yeah, it's such a phenomenon to watch kind of expand, especially after the whole hype of COVID's kind of slowly died down. To see how this will still remain relevant.
Yeah, and just grow. It's fast change.
And an interesting takeaway from this whole conversation is no one has mentioned Skype once, which
Wow.
5 years ago they were the predominant streaming platform.
That's true. Yeah, great point.
Moving on to the next story here. I wanted to talk about the Ford Bronco. So, the Bronco is a popular Ford car that they're bringing back for the first time in 24 years. It's on a 24-year hiatus. Generated a ton of buzz online when they decided to come back. I believe they dropped a bunch of different TV spots on different stations with a unique ad on each one. And then they, of course, launched them online and they put them out on Hulu. So, it generated quite a bit of buzz when the Bronco made its return. But what I want to talk about with the Ford Bronco is they're releasing an 8-part podcast alongside the release of it to help one, so the podcast is called Bringing Back Bronco. And the goal of the podcast is aimed to build on the excitement of the Broncos' return while explaining its cultural significance to younger consumers who may have no memory of the SUV. So, with it being gone for 24 years, people even in their 30s might not even remember the Ford Bronco when it was in its heyday. And I just thought it was interesting that they're deciding to use a podcast to communicate the story of the Bronco. And they're not going to talk about just the highs. They're also going to talk about the OJ Simpson police chase. They're going to talk about the history of the Bronco in these 8 episodes. And I have some numbers here included in the article. Apparently, almost half, 48% of US consumers ages 12 to 34 say they listen to podcasts at least once a month. If I was a betting man, I would bet that if you split that age in two, if you went like 12 to 18 and then 19 to 34, a majority of that 48% would fall 19 to 34. I don't think kids that young are listening to podcasts yet, at least from the qualitative research, quote unquote, that I've done towards it. But it's interesting to see that they're using the podcast medium as the primary way to educate the new consumers about this product. And I'm curious what you guys think about product driven companies launching podcasts to provide more detail and information about their product.
I know Cam loves this.
Yeah, what's that?
Well, you pointed out the great one that the SaaS company had at one point. Another good take on a podcast, but I mean, this is just like customer storytelling plus marketing plus podcasting to a T.
Yeah. No, totally. But you're right. Like I do like this notion, especially like because instantly it has that appeal that it's an exclusive limited edition podcast. It's probably not going to be around forever, and for anybody that either has been a fan of the Bronco or had a Bronco, they're obviously going to be interested, and that's going to be enticing for them to listen. But then the people that they're trying to attract, this is a completely new way, especially the industry, being an auto, to attract such a young demo. And I really like the two things here, that it's limited, and it's around a product, because there's going to be lots of storytelling around that. And I think, again, coming back to the demo that they're trying to target, storytelling is just the way to go. And podcasts is probably the best way to do that long form. So I really like that. And I think, branching out from just how Ford's doing it, I would like to see more brands do this, and doing it in that limited style. Like there's never going to be that intent of doing it long term, but just setting up like this story and having lots of different aspects to it. I can create a lot of unique hype and attention around a product by building emotion as well, right? But also getting feedback on kind of what people are thinking, because you're going to have people, sending you tweets or sending reviews on what they think of the episodes, and building up that hype in a pretty short amount of time, not losing people's attention. But I really do like the notion of these like limited edition podcast sets. I was trying to think who did that more recently. Well, actually, an interesting thing, not to do with branding, but the limited edition, is a lot of media networks opened a coronavirus or COVID-19 podcast specifically for, COVID. And then where's your attention going to go after that, right? And hooking them elsewhere. But yeah, overall like that.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And I mean, the one thing that really comes to mind with this too, and you were talking about the different markets, like outside of the Bronco buyers or the early adopters of the Bronco way back in the day. Because I mean, I think I saw the video, and that truck went off the market. What was it, like the 70s or something like that, or 90s? I guess it was. I don't know.
90s.
Yeah, 90s. And so the innovation aspect and like the the design, and I'm sure that kind of story that they'll tell, like that will capture a certain pool of people that are interested in that kind of like innovation design, like what goes into building things with your hands and crafting things and being creative. Then you have like the history people, the story people, the ones who are like always watching documentaries, and they're interested in hearing about this because of more of the historical aspect, like you talked about, and taking you through the years, and why they thought to redo the Bronco. Like there's a lot of unique ways that you could look at this and through a certain lens of perspective can really get interested in what type of content that series is going to have to offer. So yeah, the scarcity and I think the limited thing is brilliant. I totally agree with you, Cam, in the sense of when I saw the article and then watched the video, my initial sort of sense is it's like not something that's going to be around forever, like limited, and it'll be something you want to hear about just so you kind of have context and you could talk about it in a conversation, you know. And is it, by the way, is this an electric car? I was just curious. Or is this like the craziest stunt to try and launch like what seems to be a really dumb idea and launch a new gasoline truck?
Yeah. According to this article, so they haven't officially stated that there'll be an electric version of the car. So it is a gasoline car.
Wow.
Good for them. Sticking to the
Yeah.
roots.
What?
Yeah. Crazy.
One thing, so as we're kind of talking and as I'm thinking here about just the podcast, I think the podcast as a promotional tool is interesting, but I think where podcasts will thrive is using the Bronco as the initial example, is I think it will do better with establishing a strong, fortifying the connection between old Bronco fans and the new Bronco. And then like in my, just personally, so I don't know if you guys have either played the video game The Last of Us or The Last of Us Part 2. I just finished part 2 a couple days ago, learned there was a Last of Us podcast, and have since been absolutely hooked on it and binging through this Last of Us podcast, which just features developers from the game, the writer, some of the voice actors, just talking about the decisions that went into making this game and things that almost made the game that they pulled out and different things. And it makes me want to go back and play the game again. And I literally just finished it. And I never replay games very often, but it's just making me a bigger fan of the podcast or of the video game through this podcast. So I think podcast as a promotional is interesting, but then you have to just gain fans to the product and the podcast at the same time versus with how they're doing it with The Last of Us is they're almost focused on consumer retention by kind of pulling back the curtain and telling you all these stories and making you more connected to the brand after the fact. And it's worked on me. I feel more retained as a customer to The Last of Us after listening to this podcast versus if I'd listened to it when I wasn't a fan, it wouldn't have had the same effect.
Yeah, I mean, I always like one of my favorite podcasts of all time was like How It's Made, and talking about the process of like in which you went through to do something is always interesting, especially to the people that are like interested in that end product or the result that you came to. And it builds a bigger foundation. It is a risky thing ultimately. I mean, I kind of think of like the attribution behind it and like what Ford would be looking for. I'm trying to like ask myself like what would their goal be from that particular content type and that production? Like is it a certain amount of listens? Is it, you know, certain amount of people who listen through all 8 episodes? Obviously probably not linked to much like website attribution. It could be to some degree. But I think about that. I mean, what I do love and what you pointed at is I think podcasts are ultimately just a different form of content, and how you create a podcast can really be like it's up to you as whether the host or the marketer or you know the company. It like it's up for debate, I'd say, on whether it should be interviews and conversations or like people can kind of turn it into whatever they want as long as it's audio, right?
And now you guys had like you guys we all brought 2 articles, but you guys kind of combined both your articles together in each of your stories, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Okay, I had a couple quick hits I wanted to throw out at you guys before we kind of wrap this up. And
Let's do it.
the first one was IKEA. So IKEA put out a catalog recently, and what they ended up doing is they ended up breaking the entire 287 page catalog into Instagram posts, and they created an Instagram account called IKEA Catalogram, which is just their 2021 IKEA catalog from page 1 to 288. And they literally just took each page and they made it as a post, so you can scroll through the entire catalog online. And I don't know of any brands that have ever done this before, and I just thought that was super interesting. They a little disappointed that it's literally just the pages from the from the catalog, so it's not like social optimized or anything. But I just thought it was an interesting use of Instagram that I've never seen before.
Yeah, I think like outside of Instagram, I feel like they're doing a bigger play because I remember seeing a billboard, if I'm not mistaken, that also had some kind of unique CTA on it about the catalog. So it's interesting that like what they're trying to do with it, because like to me a catalog just seems so old school. Um, so yeah, like I would say cool idea, like really cool idea to like break that down. I mean, I guess putting it on Instagram is a way to optimize for social, but yeah, to your point, Jacob, it'd be really sweet if there had stories and highlights, and then ultimately feed posts that were actually linked to the products. Like I don't just scrolling through, they're not even linking any of the shopping, like Instagram shopping on any of these posts, which kind of seems like a
Missed
um
opportunity.
like, yeah, like missed opportunity. Like the product literally says the price, what it is, and I just now have to go, if I wanted it, go and try to search for it on IKEA. So I think that's a cool opportunity to like reinvent the catalog almost, which I would could see them continuously doing, and maybe down the road if they see this as like even some sort of traction, if there was a test or something, be doing that. But I would say like, hey, for other brands, um, how can you take old ways of doing things and turn them into a socially native method, or vehicle, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I'll try to be short with this answer, but I think that this may have been a bit more of a learning exercise for them and an attempt to see how audiences respond, like a certain audience and a younger audience that's a little bit more digitally oriented to something like this that, they're trying on Instagram for the first time. And two, like after you build up that audience, right, you can look at some of those insights or use a tool like Social Rank, whatever it may be, to further understand like who did we capture, or like what kind of awareness did we generate with this type of page, and was it the type of audience that we thought we would follow, would follow us on Instagram, like a younger, maybe whatever, 20 to 30, mostly females potentially, or was it actually like our core audience of people who are normally shopping at IKEA, maybe a little bit more older, like baby boomer generation? Because I think what they're probably considering with this type of tactic is, we know we need to get in front of a younger audience and start to hook them on what we believe is some of our core, like to the bone marketing tactics, aka the actual thing itself, like the big old book with all the pictures, 288 pages. Um, I I don't know how much people like our age, or even, who are in there maybe like mid 30s, respond to that type of like booklet. I don't like that's like, I don't respond personally to that type of stuff, but I might take a scroll down the Instagram page. So I think it's probably an exercise of like understand your audience and see how this type of thing works. Because I mean, to your guys' point, like it seems like they missed a lot of opportunity by doing this. So it must have been a kind of a first stunt. See what happens.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I see opportunity there, but still a ways to go, especially if you are trying to target like millennials.
Oh, big time. Yeah. I think even just like going back on that Bronco point, storytelling, and like I didn't look at the captions, but I imagine that it didn't include anything to do with like how did they come up with this design, or who was involved with that process? Like, that would be interesting to know too. Becomes a lot more shareable.
The other quick hit I just want to give you guys before we wrap up here was obviously Gymshark recently received investment which put the company valuation at $1.3 billion. And the reason I want to talk about it on here is because they built that company off the backs of influencers. Like they're one of the companies that really did influencer marketing right during the early 2000s. And Ian Borthwick here, who's SeatGeek's influencer marketing manager, he did a thread on it. And basically in 2012, Gymshark went to the UK Fitness Expo, and Ben Francis, the founder, essentially put it on the line, took every dollar that the company had to get the booth and hiring niche fitness YouTubers to show up. And their first day, they made 42 billion or four, sorry, they made $42,000 that first day. And then from there, they realized that they can't compete with Nike and Under Armour on TV, where they don't have the big budgets that these brands have to do TV spots. But these big brands were overlooking social influencers, and so they went all in on influencers, and that's how they grew the company. And now the company's valued at over $1 billion.
Yeah, it's absurd. Good for them. I mean, what struck me about that article was basically how it started. Like the company started like a lot of like really successful starting or clothing companies seem to. Like I know the one that's coming to mind. Well, Lululemon and stuff like that started the same way, but like just generally, a lot of times who are successful, like people who are successful making clothes, and when they delve into that clothes and lifestyle brand realm, you start making it because it's just something you want to wear. And like, it seems like so simple. It's like, yeah, we just were making like our own clothes because it was stuff that we really wanted to wear. And then, how quickly like some social influencers and that can make a big difference on your business. I think on the social side, like they're, yeah, a standard as it relates to influencers, a standard as it relates to community building. They're, like it says in the article, if you guys want to read it, they're core to their audience. They don't try and do much else. They go after their audience, they serve their needs, and ultimately the audience replies, they engage.
Yeah, I mean, it's just extremely impressive to see that company go, especially having, such large competitors. Even not even like looking at like the traditional brands like Nike or Adidas, but even Alpha Elite, like they were like neck and neck. They felt like just they got into the market to battle each other in a sense. And the way Gymshark just like relentlessly just went after influencers and grew their roster was pretty incredible. I mean, I've read a few case studies on them, and to see how focused, going back to that thing of just do one thing extremely well, and they just did influencer marketing. Like they for any kind of fashion, you can turn to Gymshark and be like, that's how you do influencer marketing. I'm sure it goes a lot deeper than that, but I honestly like not in shock from how that company goes about capturing today's attention via the most world renowned fitness influencers.
No, 100%. But I think that concludes the second ever episode of the Social Report. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to record this. I want to, as always, give you the floor and let the people know where they can find you.
At Scott Berty on Instagram and LinkedIn. It's Berty.
Yeah, and you can definitely catch myself on Instagram, Cam Russell, and yeah, LinkedIn as well, but mainly Instagram, Cam Russell.
Awesome. I want to thank you guys once again for taking time to be in this podcast. I want to thank everybody for listening, whether you've listened the entire way through, you've only listened to bits and pieces. I really appreciate you taking time to check this out. If you'd like to learn about any of the stories we talked about today, if you'd like to follow Cam or Scott, I'll make sure everything's linked in the show notes down below. If you'd like to follow me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at the Jacob Kelly. Feel free to come and say hello. My DMs are always open. If you'd like to follow the podcast, you can find us on Instagram at My Social Life Podcast or YouTube by searching up My Social Life. As always, today's podcast is powered by Trufan. Thank you once again for listening, everybody. We'll talk soon.